Maria woke up before sunrise, though there was no reason to rush. The roosters had barely started to crow and the sky outside her window was still gray. Her small apartment felt even smaller that morning. The air was heavy, thick with the smell of damp clothes and instant coffee that had gone cold on the table. For a few minutes she just sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the cracked wall in front of her. Every morning started the same way lately. Not with energy or purpose, but with that slow, dragging feeling that came from somewhere deep inside. It was the kind of tiredness that no sleep could fix. Maria worked as a social worker for a small community center on the edge of the city. It wasn't much, but it used to mean something to her. Years ago, she used to wake up excited, ready to help families, talk to children, and organize food drives. She believed in kindness, in change, in small miracles. But over time, those beliefs had worn thin. She had seen too many hungry faces, too many promises broken by politicians who only showed up when cameras were around, too many children she couldn't save. Maria had always told herself that one person could make a difference, but now she wasn't so sure. Her phone buzzed on the table. It was a reminder. Community shelter, 8:30 a.m. She stared at it for a long time before turning it off. For the first time in 10 years, she didn't want to go. She got up slowly and walked to the window. The street below was waking up. Vendors setting up their stalls, tricycles honking, the smell of fried dough floating through the air. People were busy, living, surviving. She used to be one of them, full of fight. But now she just felt empty. Her reflection in the window looked older than she remembered. There were faint lines around her eyes and mouth, not from smiling, but from worry. Life had not been kind, but she had kept going. Until now. Maria made herself a cup of coffee and sat by the window, holding it with both hands as if the warmth could fill the space inside her that had gone cold. Her thoughts drifted back to the night before. She had visited a family living under a bridge, a mother and 3 children. The mother had lost her job and the youngest child was sick. Maria had done what she could, bringing rice and canned food, but it never felt like enough. As she left, the mother had said quietly, "You're the only one who still comes, ma'am. Everyone else has forgotten us." That sentence should have filled Maria with pride or hope. Instead, it made her feel like a fraud, because deep down she wanted to forget too. She took a deep breath and whispered to herself, "Maybe it's time." By mid-morning, she was standing outside the community center. The building was old, its paint peeling, its sign faded. Inside, she could hear the familiar sounds. People talking, children laughing, someone sweeping the floor. "Good morning, Ma'am Maria." A young volunteer greeted her with a smile. Maria forced a smile back. "Good morning." She walked to her small office, closed the door, and stared at her desk. It was cluttered with papers, folders, and a half-eaten pack of crackers. On the wall was a poster that read, "Be the change you wish to see in the world." She had hung it there years ago. Now it just felt like a lie. Her co-worker, Liza, knocked softly and peeked in. "Hey, you okay?" "You look tired." "I'm fine," Maria replied, though she wasn't. Liza stepped inside, holding a folder. "We got another case from the dump site area. A family with 6 kids. No food, no water, and one of the kids is sick." "I thought maybe—" Maria interrupted gently. "Liza, maybe you can handle it." Then I think I need some time." Liza looked surprised. "Of course. Is everything all right?" Maria smiled faintly. "I don't know anymore." After Liza left, Maria sat for a long time staring at the folder on her desk. Then, almost without thinking, she opened her drawer, took out her resignation letter, one she had written weeks ago but never sent, and signed it. She felt both relief and sadness as she read the words. "After 10 years of service, I am stepping down." It didn't even feel real. By noon, she had handed the letter to the center's director, packed her small bag, and walked out. No tears, no dramatic goodbye, just quiet steps away from the life she had built and no longer believed in. The sun was harsh outside, and the city noise felt louder than usual. Maria didn't know where she was going. She just walked. She passed busy streets, a small market, and then found herself near the outskirts of town, a place she rarely went. The smell hit her before she saw it, the sharp, sour odor of waste and smoke. It was the city's biggest garbage dump, mountains of trash stretched as far as the eye could see. Flies buzzed in thick clouds. Stray dogs fought over scraps. Children with bare feet picked through piles of waste, searching for plastic bottles or anything they could sell. Maria had been here before during outreach drives, but she had always come with a group carrying food and medicine. Today she was alone and it felt different. She wasn't sure why she had walked there. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was fate. She found a flat rock to sit on near the edge of the dump site. The noise of the city faded into the distance, replaced by the faint rustling of plastic and the low hum of scavengers talking to one another. She sat there quietly, her thoughts drifting. How did she get here? How did someone who once wanted to save the world end up lost in her own life? She remembered her childhood, growing up in a small town where people helped each other, where neighbors shared what little they had. Back then, kindness had felt natural, real, but the city had changed that. It had hardened her. Every act of kindness now felt like a drop in an endless ocean of need. She watched a little boy climb over a pile of garbage, carrying a sack bigger than his body. He stumbled, got up, and kept going. His determination struck something inside her. Even here in this place of decay, life refused to give up. Maria sighed and rubbed her face. "What am I doing?" she murmured to herself. She decided it was time to head home. The sky was starting to darken, the smell of burning plastic rising as people lit small fires to cook. She wrapped her scarf around her nose and began walking along the dirt path that led out of the dump. That's when she heard it. A faint sound, almost lost in the noise of crackling fire and rustling trash. At first she thought it was an animal, maybe a kitten, but then it came again, soft, weak, and strangely human. A cry. She stopped walking. Her heart skipped a beat. She turned her head, listening carefully. The sound came again, this time a little louder. It was coming from a nearby pile of waste, a mound of old clothes, broken bottles, and cardboard boxes. Maria froze. Her first instinct was fear. What if it was dangerous? But something stronger pulled her forward, an old instinct she thought she had lost. Slowly she stepped closer, her shoes crunching on glass and debris. The sound grew clearer now. It was definitely a cry, small, desperate, and full of life. She dropped her bag and began moving pieces of trash aside. Plastic bags, wet cardboard, old shoes. She pulled at them with trembling hands. The cry came again, and this time it broke her heart. "Please, no," she whispered, though she didn't even know what she was afraid of finding. After a few seconds that felt like forever, she uncovered a small, dirty blanket. It moved slightly. Her hands shook as she lifted a corner of the fabric, and her breath caught. Inside was a newborn baby, no bigger than her forearms, wrapped in rags, face streaked with dirt and tears. The baby's tiny chest rose and fell weakly, a soft whimper escaping its lips. Maria gasped and fell to her knees. "Oh my God," she whispered, her heart pounding. She didn't think. She just acted. She picked the baby up, holding it close to her chest. The little one was cold, trembling, but alive. Maria's eyes filled with tears. The world around her seemed to blur. The smell, the noise, the trash. Everything faded except the fragile life in her arms. In that moment, something inside her shifted. The woman who had lost faith felt it stir again. Maria held the baby tightly in her arms, afraid that if she let go, the tiny life might slip away. The baby was light, far too light for a newborn, and her skin was pale under the layer of dirt. She could feel the faint, uneven rhythm of her breathing against her chest. Her hands were trembling. She didn't know what to do first, cry, scream, or run. The world around her seemed to spin. The strong smell of garbage mixed with smoke burned her throat, but she ignored it. All she could think about was the little bundle in her arms. She looked around, hoping to see someone nearby. "Hello?" she called out. Her voice shook. "Is anyone here?" There was no answer. Only the sound of crows cawing in the distance and the soft crackle of fire from burning trash. A few people working nearby glanced at her for a second but quickly looked away. For them, strange things were not unusual here. Maria's heart pounded. She couldn't believe what she had just found. Who could leave a baby here? Why? She wrapped the baby tighter in the blanket, shielding her from the wind. The baby whimpered softly, a weak cry escaping her lips. "Shh, it's okay," Maria whispered, though her own voice was shaking. "You're safe now." Her mind raced. She needed to get the baby to a hospital. Every minute counted. She looked down at her shoes, now covered in dirt and ashes, and began walking quickly toward the road. Her legs felt heavy, her hands numb, but she didn't stop. The dump stretched behind her like a dark memory. Each step away from it felt like a small victory. When she reached the main road, she tried to wave down passing vehicles. The first tricycle didn't stop. The second slowed down, the driver staring at her curiously. She looked desperate, hair messy, face sweaty, holding a filthy bundle that barely moved. "Please," she said breathlessly, "I need to get to the clinic. It's a baby. Please hurry." The driver blinked, shocked. "A baby from the dump?" Maria nodded, tears running down her face. "Please, just help me." Without another question, he motioned her inside. "Get in, quick!" The tricycle roared to life and sped down the uneven road. The wind whipped her face, but she didn't care. She kept her eyes on the baby, whispering softly, "Stay with me, please. Just hold on a little longer." The baby made a tiny sound, almost like a sigh, and Maria's chest tightened. After what felt like hours but was only minutes, they reached the nearest health clinic. Maria jumped out before the tricycle fully stopped and ran inside. "Nurse, please help!" she cried. "I found a baby. She's not well." The nurses rushed forward, their eyes widening at the sight. One of them gently took the baby from her arms and called for the doctor. Maria stood frozen as the medical staff surrounded the baby, checking her breathing, wiping her face, wrapping her in a clean towel. "Where did you find her?" a nurse asked quickly. "At the dump," Maria answered, still trying to catch her breath. "She was just there, alone." The nurse nodded, already focused on the baby. "She's dehydrated, weak, probably only a few hours old. It's a miracle she's alive." Maria's knees gave way and she sat down on a nearby bench. Her whole body was trembling. She looked down at her hands, now covered in dirt and dried blood. Her heart hurt, not from fear, but from something deeper. Disbelief mixed with sorrow. Minutes felt like hours as she waited. Nurses came and went, speaking in hushed tones. Finally, the doctor walked over to her. "She's stable for now," he said gently. "You brought her just in time. Another hour and—" He paused, shaking his head. "You did the right thing." Maria exhaled shakily, tears filling her eyes again. "Is she going to be okay?" "We'll do everything we can," the doctor replied. "The authorities will be notified. This will be treated as a case of child abandonment. But you saved her life." Those words hit her hard. You saved her life. She hadn't saved anyone in years. Or at least that's how it felt. As the doctor walked away, Maria covered her face with her hands and cried. The kind of cry that comes from the deepest part of a person, where pain and relief meet. After a while, a nurse approached her. "You should rest. You look exhausted." Maria shook her head. "I'll stay. I just want to make sure she's okay." The nurse gave her a soft smile and nodded. "All right. You can sit outside the nursery room. But please eat something." Maria managed a weak thank you and followed her. Through the glass window, she could see the baby lying in an incubator wrapped in clean white cloth. Tiny tubes and wires connected to her little body, but she was breathing steadily now. Maria pressed her hand against the glass. "You're strong," she whispered. "You made it through the worst. You're going to live." For the next few hours, she sat there silently watching. The clinic grew quieter as evening came. The sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway, and the smell of disinfectant filled the air. She thought about how strange life was. Just that morning, she had walked away from her job, ready to give up on everything she once cared about. And now, a few hours later, she was sitting in a clinic, watching over a baby she had pulled from the trash. It didn't make sense, but something about it felt right. Around midnight, an officer arrived to take her statement. He was kind, speaking in a calm tone. "So you just happened to be passing by the dump site?" he asked. "Yes," Maria said softly. "I wasn't planning to go there. I just walked, and then I heard her cry." The officer nodded, writing in his notebook. "You did a brave thing." Not everyone would have stopped. Maria smiled faintly. "I didn't think. I just moved." After signing some papers, she asked quietly, "What will happen to her now?" "The Department of Child Welfare will take over once she's well," the officer explained. "She'll be placed in temporary care until we find out more. Maybe an adoption later if no one claims her." Maria's heart ached at the thought. "Will she be safe?" The officer looked at her with gentle eyes. "Yes, she's safe now." When he left, Maria leaned back against the wall. She should have gone home, but she couldn't. Every time she thought of leaving, Something inside her resisted. The baby's soft breathing on the other side of the glass seemed to call to her. At dawn, the doctor came out again and smiled. She's getting stronger. You really found her just in time. A few more hours and... He stopped himself, but Maria understood. She nodded. Can I see her? Of course. Just for a moment. The nurse opened the door to the nursery. The warm air and the gentle beeping of machines filled the room. Maria stepped inside carefully, her eyes fixed on the baby. The nurse lifted her gently and placed her in Maria's arms. The baby's skin was clean now, her face peaceful. She had a small birthmark near her ear, a tiny detail that made her seem even more precious. Maria held her close, feeling her heartbeat, soft but steady. You're a fighter, she whispered. A little fighter, the nurse smiled. She needs a name for the hospital record. Just something temporary. Would you like to choose? Maria looked at the baby for a long moment. Then she said softly, Call her Lucia. Lucia, the nurse repeated, writing it down. That's beautiful. It means light, Maria said. She deserves that. The nurse nodded approvingly. Light. That's perfect. As she handed the baby back, Maria felt something stir in her chest, a warmth she hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't just compassion, it was connection. When she stepped out of the room, the sun was rising outside, painting the city in soft orange light. She walked to the window and stood there quietly, watching the world wake up. Her clothes were still dirty, her body exhausted, but her heart felt strangely alive. The day before, she had been ready to quit everything, her job, her purpose, her belief in good. But now, after hearing one tiny cry in the middle of the dump, something inside her had changed. She didn't know what would happen next. She didn't know who the baby's parents were or what the future would bring. But she knew one thing for certain. She couldn't just walk away. As she turned to leave the clinic, she looked once more at the nursery window. The baby slept peacefully, unaware that her tiny cry had reached the right person at the right moment. Maria smiled softly and whispered, You saved me too. Outside, the morning light spread across the city. People hurried to work, children ran to school, and life went on. But for Maria, everything was different now. A single cry, weak, desperate, and almost lost to the world, had found her, and it had changed everything. Maria barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the baby's tiny face, the way she had looked up from the blanket at the dump, fragile but alive. The image wouldn't leave her. It was like a quiet voice inside her kept whispering that her life had changed, even if she didn't yet understand how. When she returned to the clinic the next morning, the nurse smiled warmly. You came back, she said, though she sounded like she already knew Maria would. I just wanted to check on her, Maria replied softly. Lucia, the nurse nodded. She's doing well. She's been fed and her fever is gone. She's strong for such a tiny one. Maria felt relief wash over her. Can I see her? Of course. But only for a few minutes. She needs rest. Maria stepped quietly into the nursery. Lucia lay inside the incubator, her little chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. Her skin looked better, her lips less pale. She was wrapped in a soft white blanket, and for the first time she looked peaceful, like she finally felt safe. Maria stood there, unable to look away. The sight made her heart ache in a strange, sweet way. She reached out, gently touching the glass. You made it, she whispered. You're stronger than anyone I've ever met. The nurse came in after a few minutes. She'll stay here for another week or two, just until she's strong enough to be released. The social workers from child welfare will handle her case after that. Maria hesitated. So she'll go to an orphanage? The nurse nodded carefully. That's the usual process. Unless a family comes forward, Maria's stomach tightened. The idea of that small, helpless baby being passed from one place to another made her uneasy. She tried to convince herself that the system would take care of her, but deep down she knew how broken that system was. She had seen it. She thanked the nurse and left the room, but her heart felt heavy. As she walked home through the busy streets, she couldn't stop thinking about Lucia. For the next few days, Maria went back to the clinic every morning. She brought small things, baby wipes, a soft towel, some milk powder the nurse had requested. Everyone at the clinic started recognizing her face. Some of them smiled knowingly when she walked in. as if they understood what she couldn't yet admit to herself. One morning, the doctor caught her outside the nursery. "You've been coming every day," he said kindly. "Do you have children of your own?" Maria shook her head. "No." "Then you must have a big heart," the doctor said. "Most people forget what they see at the dump. But you couldn't." She smiled faintly. "I couldn't," she admitted. "I tried, but I couldn't." When she left that day, she found herself walking past the community center where she used to work. Through the window, she saw Liza organizing supplies, talking to a group of volunteers. For a moment, Maria almost went inside. But she didn't, not yet. She wasn't ready to face her old life. That night, she lay awake on her bed, staring at the ceiling. The city outside buzzed with life. Tricycles, music, dogs barking. But her mind was miles away, back in that nursery. She thought about Lucia's tiny hand wrapped around the nurse's finger, about her soft breathing, about how easily she could have been lost forever. She turned on her side, whispering into the dark, "Why did I find you? Why me?" There was no answer, only the faint hum of the ceiling fan. But somehow she felt that maybe she didn't need one. A few days later, the social worker from child welfare called her. They had been notified that she was the one who found the baby, and they wanted to record her official statement. She went to the office, the same type she used to work in. Same kind of furniture, same smell of paper and disinfectant. The woman across the desk smiled politely. "Thank you for coming, ma'am. We just need some basic information. You found the infant at the dump on the afternoon of the 14th, correct?" "Yes," Maria replied. "Did you see anyone around?" "Any witnesses?" "No," Maria said softly. There was no one. The woman nodded, writing notes. "All right. We're classifying her as an abandoned infant. The police report has been filed, and once she's cleared by the doctor, she'll be transferred to our care." Maria hesitated before asking, "Can someone like me foster her?" The woman looked up, slightly surprised. "Foster? You mean temporarily care for her?" "Yes," Maria said quickly. "Just until you find something more permanent." The woman studied her for a moment. "Do you have prior experience with childcare?" Maria took a breath. "I worked with children for years at a community center. I know it won't be easy. I can't stop thinking about her." The woman smiled gently. "It's good that you care. I'll give you the forms. You'll need to submit identification, proof of residence, and attend a short interview. It takes some time, but it's possible." Maria left the office with the papers clutched tightly in her hands. She didn't know what she was doing. All she knew was that she couldn't let Lucia slip away into the system, not when she was the one who heard her cry first. Over the next week, she filled out every form, submitted every requirement, and attended every interview. The process was slow, full of waiting and questions, but she didn't give up. The staff at the clinic cheered quietly for her when they found out what she was doing. "You'd make a wonderful foster mother," one nurse told her. "You already care like one." Finally, the call came. Her request was approved. Maria could hardly breathe when she heard the words. She thanked the social worker and rushed to the clinic, her heart racing. When she arrived, the nurse smiled and said, "She's ready to go home." Home. The word felt strange but beautiful. The nurse handed her a small bag with milk, diapers, and a few supplies. Then she gently placed Lucia in Maria's arms. The baby opened her eyes for a moment, blinking at the light, and let out a soft sigh. Maria felt tears fill her eyes again. "Hi," she whispered, smiling. "It's me. We're going home." The walk back to her apartment felt different that day. Every step seemed lighter, though her heart was full. Strangers looked at her and smiled when they saw the baby. One old woman even said, "She's beautiful." "You're lucky," Maria nodded. "I know." At home, she placed Lucia carefully on the bed and sat beside her, unsure what to do first. The room was small and plain, but she wanted to make it warm. She found an old blanket, folded it gently, and laid it beside the baby. Then she boiled water for milk, her hands shaking slightly. When Lucia started to fuss, Maria panicked for a second, then remembered what the nurse had told her. Gentle movements, soft voice. She picked her up, rocked her slowly, and began to hum. The baby quieted almost instantly, her tiny face relaxing against Maria's shoulder. That moment felt magical. For the first time in years, Maria smiled without forcing it. She didn't feel tired or hopeless. She felt alive. Days turned into weeks, and each day brought new challenges. Sleepless nights, endless diaper changes, cries that she couldn't always understand. But there were also little miracles. Lucia's first smile, her first laugh, the way her eyes followed Maria's face wherever she went. Neighbors started visiting, bringing small gifts, baby clothes, old toys, advice. "You're glowing," one of them said. "Motherhood suits you," Maria laughed softly. "I'm still learning." But inside she knew this was more than learning. It was healing. Sometimes she would sit by the window at night holding Lucia close and think about how her life had changed. Just a few weeks ago she was ready to give up on everything. Now she had a reason to wake up every morning. She didn't know what the future held, whether Lucia would stay with her forever or not. But she knew that for now, this was where she was meant to be. One evening, as she watched Lucia sleep peacefully, Maria whispered, "You came into my life when I was lost, and somehow you found me." The baby stirred slightly as if she understood. Maria smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Maybe that's what destiny really means," she said softly. "Not something we chase, but something that finds us when we need it most." The city outside hummed quietly, lights flickering in distant buildings. Inside that small apartment, love had found a new home. Fragile, unexpected, but real. Maria leaned back, closed her eyes, and whispered, "Thank you for crying that day. You didn't just save your life, you saved mine too." The days after Maria brought Lucia home were both beautiful and hard. Everything felt new, and every little sound from the baby filled her tiny apartment with life. The place that once felt empty now echoed with soft cries, small giggles, and the rustle of baby blankets. At first, Maria didn't know what she was doing. She had helped children before through her work, but caring for a baby full-time was different. There were no office hours, no breaks, no one to hand things over to. The baby needed her every minute of the day, and she didn't mind. Each morning, Maria would wake up to the soft sound of Lucia moving in her sleep. She would watch her tiny face, her slow breathing, and whisper, "Good morning, little light." It became their daily greeting. Money was tight. Maria had used most of her small savings to buy milk, diapers, and baby clothes from a second-hand shop. She made careful lists and spent only what she had to. Her meals became simpler, mostly rice, soup, and bread, but she didn't care. Every time she looked at Lucia, she felt full in a way that food could never give. One afternoon, Maria sat on the floor beside the baby's crib, humming softly while folding small clothes. A knock on the door interrupted her. It was Liza, her old co-worker from the community center, carrying a basket of baby items. "I heard from one of the nurses," Liza said with a warm smile. "You really did it, huh?" "You took her home." Maria smiled back, feeling shy. "Yes, I couldn't let her go." Liza stepped inside, looking around the small apartment. "You've made it cozy. And she looks so healthy." Maria picked up Lucia gently and placed her in Liza's arms. "She's a fighter. You should have seen her when I found her." Liza's eyes softened as she looked at the baby. "You did something amazing, Maria. Not everyone could do what you did." Maria shook her head. "I didn't plan it. It just happened. I think she found me as much as I found her." They talked for a long time that day, about old times at the center, about how much had changed. Liza told her the team still missed her, that there were always people asking when she would come back. When Liza left, Maria sat by the window, watching the sky fade from gold to gray. She thought about the work she used to do, helping families, comforting children, believing in small miracles. Somewhere along the way, she had lost faith in all of it. But now, with Lucia in her arms, she was starting to believe again. Weeks turned into months, and the baby grew stronger. She began to smile when Maria's face appeared and giggle when she heard her voice. Each small milestone felt like a victory. But life wasn't easy. Maria sometimes woke up in the middle of the night worrying about money. She had left her job and her savings were disappearing fast. She tried doing small tasks for neighbors, washing clothes, helping with errands, anything to earn a little extra. One evening, after putting Lucia to sleep, Maria sat at the table with her old notebook. It was filled with ideas from her time at the community center, projects that were never completed, dreams she once had for helping others. She looked around her apartment, cluttered but peaceful, and whispered, "Maybe I can start again. Maybe in a small way." The next morning, she went to the local market and talked to the vendors. She asked if they had leftover vegetables or rice that would otherwise be thrown away. Some looked at her curiously, but a few agreed. By the end of the week, Maria had collected enough to make simple food packages: rice, vegetables, and bread. She tied them in small plastic bags and brought them to the families who lived near the dump site, the same place where Lucia had been found. When she arrived, people recognized her. "It's you," one woman said. "The one who found the baby." Maria smiled shyly. "Yes, I just wanted to help." Word spread quickly. Soon, other volunteers from the old community center joined her. Together, they organized small drives, giving food, clothes, and first aid to those in need. Maria carried Lucia everywhere she went. People would gather around to see the baby. Some called her the miracle child. Others whispered that maybe she was sent by God to remind people that kindness still existed. At night, when the city grew quiet, Maria would sit with Lucia by the window and talk to her softly. "You changed everything," she'd say. "You made me remember who I was." One afternoon, while she was preparing food packages, she received a letter from Child Welfare. Her foster term was ending soon. If she wished, she could apply to adopt Lucia permanently. Her hands shook as she read it. The idea of losing Lucia made her chest tighten, but the thought of keeping her, of becoming her mother forever, filled her with a warmth she couldn't describe. She sat there for a long time, staring at the letter, tears in her eyes. Finally, she whispered, "Yes, I'll do it." Over the next few weeks, she worked harder than ever. She cleaned houses, helped elderly neighbors, and even took in laundry to save money for the legal fees. Every night, she'd fall asleep exhausted but happy, knowing she was one step closer to making Lucia officially hers. And then one bright morning, she stood before a small office desk, signing the final papers. The officer smiled kindly. "Congratulations. It's official. She's your daughter now." Maria looked down at Lucia, sleeping peacefully in her arms, and whispered, "Welcome home, my little light." It was the happiest day of her life. That evening, as the sun set outside her window, she held Lucia close and whispered a prayer of thanks. She didn't have everything she wanted. She didn't have much money or a big house or fancy clothes, but she had love, pure and simple, and that was enough. Part 4 life slowly began to bloom again for Maria. With Lucia now legally her daughter, everything felt new. The mornings brighter, the air lighter, and even the smallest sounds around the house seemed to carry joy. Lucia was growing fast. She had started to crawl, her tiny hands exploring everything within reach. Maria had to move things higher, laughing every time Lucia managed to find something she shouldn't. "You're too smart for me," she would say, smiling. But beneath the laughter, there were still struggles. Money was tight, and some days Maria wasn't sure how she'd afford the next bag of milk or the next electric bill. But somehow things always worked out. A neighbor offering her sewing work, a small donation from the community center, or a stranger's kindness at just the right time. Lucia's presence brought people together. Whenever Maria walked through the neighborhood, people greeted her warmly. They often asked to hold Lucia or simply smiled at the sight of her. The baby had that effect. She made people soften. Maria had become a familiar face again at the community center. She volunteered part-time, helping organize food drives, teaching basic reading to children, and counseling young mothers who had lost hope. Her coworkers admired how much she had changed. "You're different now," Liza said one afternoon. "There's something in your eyes." "Peace, maybe," Maria smiled. "It's Lucia," she said. She reminded me that even in the darkest places there's still light. Soon, Maria had an idea, to start a small project helping abandoned or neglected children like Lucia. She spoke with the center's director, and together they launched a weekly outreach program at the dump site, offering food, medical care, and storytelling sessions for kids. The first time Maria returned there, her heart pounded. The smell, the noise, and it all came rushing back. But this time she didn't feel fear or sadness. She felt strength. She walked to the same spot where she had first heard that faint cry months ago. For a moment she stood still, holding Lucia in her arms. "This is where it began," she whispered. "This is where our story started." Lucia reached out and touched her face, babbling softly as if she understood. Maria smiled and wiped her tears. "We're not leaving this place in sadness anymore. We're bringing hope this time." From that day forward, every Saturday became Hope Day. Maria and her group handed out food, read stories, and offered medical checkups. Slowly, the once-forgotten children of the dump began to laugh again. Maria watched them and often thought about how everything had come full circle. At night, after Lucia had fallen asleep, Maria would sit by the window and write in her notebook, ideas, plans, and dreams. She wanted to create a foundation one day, a place for children who needed love and safety. Her apartment was still small, but now it was filled with warmth, colorful drawings, toys scattered everywhere, and laughter echoing through the walls. One rainy evening, Maria sat rocking Lucia to sleep while rain tapped gently on the roof. She hummed softly, thinking of all that had changed. She had once been a woman ready to quit, broken by disappointment and exhaustion, but life had found a way to reach her, through a baby's cry in the dark. Sometimes destiny doesn't call loudly. Sometimes it whispers through tears and silence, waiting for someone to listen. Lucia stirred slightly in her sleep, her small hand resting on Maria's heart. Maria smiled and whispered, "You're my miracle. You saved me in ways you'll never know." The next morning, Maria woke early, full of energy. She packed a few things and went back to the dump site. The air was clear after the rain, and the sun shone on the piles of garbage, making them almost sparkle. She walked through the familiar path, not with sadness this time, but with gratitude. The people there waved and called out her name. Children ran to greet her, their smiles bright and genuine. Maria handed out food and told stories under the shade of a broken tarpaulin. Her voice was soft but full of emotion. She spoke of hope, of second chances, and of how love could come from the most unexpected places. When she finished, one little boy asked, "Miss, do you really believe in miracles?" Maria looked at him, then down at Lucia sitting on her lap, giggling. "Yes," she said with a smile. "I'm holding one right now." The children clapped, their laughter echoing across the dump. For the first time, that place, once filled with sadness and decay, felt alive with something new. Later, as Maria walked home with Lucia asleep in her arms, she looked up at the sky painted in orange light. Her heart was full. She had no riches, no grand success, but she had peace. That cry from the dump had not only saved a baby, it had given Maria a new life, a new purpose, and a reason to believe again. And though the road ahead would still have challenges, she knew one thing for sure: she would never walk it alone again, because sometimes one small act of compassion can rewrite an entire destiny, not just for the one saved, but for the one who chooses to save. When Maria woke up that morning, the soft sunlight had already filled the small room. Lucia was still asleep beside her, one tiny hand resting on Maria's arm. Her breathing was calm and steady, and her little face looked peaceful. For a moment, Maria just watched her. Every time she looked at Lucia, she felt the same quiet amazement she had felt since the day she found her. The apartment was still modest, just 2 small rooms, a little kitchen corner, and a balcony where she hung clothes to dry, but now it felt like a home. The smell of warm milk and soap replaced the silence that once filled the air. Toys lay scattered across the floor, and drawings made by the children from the community center were taped to the walls. Maria had grown used to early mornings. She would wake before Lucia, prepare breakfast, and then gently rock her daughter awake. "Good morning, my little light," she would whisper, the same words she'd spoken since the very first day. Lucia would smile sleepily, her chubby hands reaching out. That smile had become the brightest part of Maria's day. After breakfast, Maria packed a few bags, some rice, bread, and vegetables she had collected from the market the day before. She tied them neatly, ready for another day of helping the families near the dump site. Since she started visiting them again, more people had joined her. Some were old friends from the shelter. Others were neighbors who wanted years had passed since the day Maria first heard that faint cry in the dump. Time had changed many things: her home, her heart, and her purpose. Yet some memories still felt as fresh as yesterday. Whenever she walked by that old path near the edge of the garbage site, she still heard that cry in her mind. It was the sound that had changed everything. Lucia was now 6 years old, a bright and cheerful child with curious eyes and a laugh that could melt even the coldest hearts. She loved to run barefoot through the small yard outside their home. chasing butterflies or playing with the neighborhood kids. Everyone knew her. Everyone loved her. Maria often stood by the window watching Lucia play. Sometimes she could hardly believe that this happy, lively girl was the same tiny baby she had once pulled from the dirt and held against her chest, praying she would live. Life wasn't easy, but it was full. Maria had started a small foundation 2 years ago called Little Light. It began as a simple feeding program for children living near the dump site, but it had grown into something much bigger. Now they had a small rented space with tables, chairs, and a few shelves filled with books and toys. Volunteers came every week to teach, feed, and play with the kids. Maria never called herself the founder or leader. She said she was just someone who listened when a cry came from the dark. Every morning she opened the small center with a smile. Children greeted her eagerly, some running into her arms. "Teacher Maria," they'd call. "We're here," she'd laugh and say, "Good morning, everyone. Who's ready to learn today?" Some days they taught letters and numbers. Other days they just sat in a circle talking about dreams. One boy said he wanted to be a doctor. Another wanted to drive a bus. Lucia always said she wanted to be like her mother, someone who helped people smile again. That always made Maria's eyes fill with quiet tears. The community had changed too. People who once struggled in silence now worked together. The small dump area had been partly cleared, and new shelters were built by volunteers and donors Maria had met through her work. She had learned how to speak to local leaders, write letters for help, and even organize small fundraisers. Sometimes she felt nervous when talking in front of people, especially when sharing her story, but she told it anyway because it wasn't just about her. It was about the power of one small moment, one single choice that could change a life. One warm afternoon, Maria was preparing for an event at the center. It was their foundation's 2nd anniversary. She had invited families, volunteers, and some local officials. Lucia helped by tying small ribbons on chairs and arranging flowers in recycled jars. "Does this look nice, Mama?" Lucia asked, standing proudly beside her work. Maria smiled. "It looks beautiful, my love. Just like you." When everyone arrived, the room was filled with laughter and the soft hum of conversation. Children sang songs they had practiced, their voices sweet and clear. Maria stood quietly near the back, her heart full. After the songs, someone called her to the front. "Say a few words, Maria," one of the volunteers said with a smile. Maria took a deep breath. She wasn't used to speeches, but she knew this was her moment to thank everyone. She looked at the crowd, mothers, fathers, children, neighbors, and began to speak. "When I started this journey," she said softly, "I didn't know where it would lead. I only knew that I heard a cry one day, a cry that came from a place most people avoid. I thought I was helping someone that day. But the truth is, that cry helped me. It gave me back my purpose, my hope, and my reason to live." The room was silent, all eyes on her. She continued, her voice trembling slightly. "Sometimes we wait for miracles to happen, but maybe miracles are waiting for us to listen, to act, to care. Lucia is my miracle, and because of her, this place exists. Because of her, I learned that love can grow from the darkest corners." Tears filled many eyes, and soft applause spread through the room. Lucia ran up to hug her mother, and the crowd smiled as they stood together, a symbol of hope, born from despair. After the event, as the sun began to set, Maria sat outside with Lucia on her lap. They watched the sky turn orange and pink. "Mama," Lucia said softly, "why do you always help other children?" Maria smiled and brushed a strand of hair from Lucia's face. "Because I want them to feel the same love you gave me," she said. "You may not remember it, but you saved me, Lucia. I was lost before you came." Lucia frowned a little, not fully understanding. "Saved you? How?" Maria kissed her forehead gently. "One day when you're older, you'll understand. Sometimes we save others, but sometimes they save us too, without even knowing." Lucia smiled, content, and leaned her head against her mother's chest. The wind was cool that evening, carrying the faint laughter of children playing nearby. Maria closed her eyes and let the sound fill her heart. She thought of the woman she used to be, tired, hopeless, ready to give up. And she thought of the woman she had become, strong, alive, grateful. Her life had come full circle. Weeks later, Maria received a letter from a local organization. They wanted to partner with her foundation to expand their work to other nearby communities. The idea made her both excited and nervous. It would mean more responsibility, more travel, more people to care for. That night, she sat by the window with the letter in her hand. Lucia slept soundly nearby. Maria smiled and whispered, "If one cry could change my life, imagine what 1,000 hearts could do together." She accepted the offer, and soon, her small foundation began to grow. New volunteers joined, and more children were fed and educated. Maria found herself traveling to villages she had never visited before. Everywhere she went, she shared her story, not to seek attention but to remind others that kindness can begin anywhere, even in a place full of garbage and despair. Years passed quickly. Lucia grew taller, smarter, and even more loving. She would often accompany Maria to the centers, helping other children with their lessons. People started calling her the girl who came from light. Maria never corrected them. In her heart, she knew the name was perfect. One day, as they were closing the center, Lucia pointed to a little boy sitting alone by the door. His clothes were worn and he looked shy. Maria went over and knelt beside him. "Hello, what's your name?" she asked kindly. The boy looked up. "I'm Tom," he said softly. "Are you hungry?" He nodded. Maria smiled and handed him a plate of food. "You're safe here, Tom. Eat as much as you want." As she watched the boy eat quietly, she felt a familiar warmth in her chest. She looked at Lucia and said, "See, my love, that's how it begins. One cry, one need, one small act of love." Lucia nodded, her eyes bright. "Just like us, Mama." Maria smiled and hugged her close. "Exactly like us." That night, as they walked home under the stars, Lucia held her mother's hand tightly. The streetlights flickered and the smell of food drifted from nearby houses. Life was still simple, not perfect but peaceful. Maria knew she would always carry the memory of that cry in the dump. It had started her journey, but it was not a story of sorrow anymore. It was a story of transformation, of how love can rise from brokenness and turn pain into purpose. When they reached home, Maria tucked Lucia into bed and whispered softly, "Good night, my little light." Lucia smiled sleepily. "Good night, Mama. I love you." Maria turned off the lamp and stood by the window one last time before sleeping. The moonlight touched her face gently. She thought about everything, the cry, the struggle, the hope, the love. And she realized that destiny isn't something written in the stars. It's something we create when we choose to care, to listen, to love. And somewhere in the quiet night, Maria whispered with a full heart, "Thank you." Because one cry from the dump had not only changed a baby's fate, it had rewritten her own forever.